also involved with Willie Tavares and even with Hunter Pence, scouting these guys and making them the players that they are. Joining us, Pat Murphy, up and onto the program here with us. So I want to say, over 30 years. I mean,
yeah,
what a tenure. And just to seeing the talent pool, the level of which, and you've been able to watch, the growth of this sport change in so many different aspects. What kind of goes through your mind when you think of the tenure you've been in this business and in this job, and what it's really like, what you gained from it, from watching it evolve over the years? Like what comes to mind 30 plus years as an MLB scout?
Yeah, it's been interesting. The game has changed a lot since I first started back in 1990, and just obviously we've evolved into the game of analytics, and the game has certainly changed from that perspective of how the game's played on the field. I mean, it's just not quite the same. It's different from my youth and my first few years in the game as a scout, as a front office guy with the game is definitely changed. So some of it for the game and some of it from my perspective of being a kind of an old school guy, not so good. It's like I watched, I learned how to play baseball, right? I couldn't hit home runs. So it's like now it's, you got three outcomes, right? You strike out, you hit a home run, or you walk. So that's kind of how it goes. That's what they're shooting for. And, the fans that love to see the long ball, man, they're all in on, right? The old Greg Maddux and that commercial that ran for so long, chicks dig the long ball.
Mm-hmm.
Good for the baseball purists, right? We kind of like seeing guys that know how to do all that. And it still exists to a certain degree, but that's the biggest change for me is just play, sitting back and waiting for the home run as opposed to aggressive of trying to get people around the bases.
So here's the thing, because in your tenure and watching the game as it evolves, as it grows, because you were around at the time when, the Moneyball experiment ended up coming around up in 2002, and how analytics and statistics really changed up a lot of the game. But now we got, launch angle. We now have automated strike zones and pitch clocks. Has that ever kind of come across when you're scouting players and you're scouting talent? Was there ever adjustment that you ever had to make that, looking at these players is like, these guys, they got a different kind of talent, but I could still see the way in which the game is played and how these guys will make it up and into the major leagues?
Well, most all scouts, myself included, they were amateur scouts. We scouted, purposes of the draft in the spring, and then scouted pro ball, minor leagues, even big leagues in the summer. And from the amateur level, change anything that we did, right? Because we weren't, scouts have been using statistics since statistics were on a stat sheet, right? It's like they just kind of repackaged it to, different things, and that's cool. I mean, I get it. Where it did change some in pro ball, right? In amateur ball, if I'm scouting in the spring, I didn't. It's tools, right? You got to scout tools. You got to scout the kids, the families. I mean, that's changed, and the clubs that have changed that and gone more for the draft, they're slacking, right? They're like behind. I mean, it just doesn't work. Now in pro ball, you're comparing apples and apples, right? You've got the AA league, right? So the stats, you can do more with that, and they mean more. Amateur wise, I didn't change a thing I was doing because that's just a bad. And some clubs have done it. Frankly, I'm not going to pile on anybody, but I'm looking for how many World Series rings Oakland has, and I can't count to. So it didn't work, is what I'm saying. They've changed, right? And all that stuff was a great book, but at the end of the day, the two best players on those Oakland teams were Eric Chavez and Miguel Tejada. And Chavez was a high school draft, which is what they were trying to kill. And Tejada signed at 16 years old out of the Right? Those weren't Moneyball guys; those were scout guys, and they, and it helps when you had Barry Hudson and Mark Mulder already on board, right? Makes Moneyball sound better, but it had to evolve, and hey, God bless them for taking a shot at it, but the proof is in the pudding, and I have 3 World Series rings and they don't have any, so there's that. So, but the smart scouts, like what all the analytics guys are doing, and we called them stat guys back in the day. They took offense to that, right? So they changed their names to the analytics guys as opposed to stat guys. That was derogatory for some reason, but used it. They helped us. I mean, I got a big league player that I signed in Tampa, spent many years in the big game, Austin Pruitt, out of the University of Houston. He was a senior, right? We paid him like virtually nothing. And in the 9th round, if it hadn't been for the stat guys, right, I wouldn't have gotten that guy because I was telling them they could draft that guy, whatever, right? And they were like, hey, how about we take him now? I'm like, I'm not the one doing the picking. Take him now, because the analytics guys loved his metrics, and that was the first, right? The pitch FX. They got all kinds of stuff. Pitch FX. He had the best in rates, what they do now. But he had the best pitch FX on his breaking ball of anybody in college football. Well, I could tell you if it's from a scout's eye, yeah, he has pretty good. They loved it, so they. Right, and he was a big leaguer for a long time, and I tried to give credit to those guys as much as possible, because they're the ones that pushed me into it, right? They pushed him higher, and so the teams that have a good blend of the analytics guys aren't always right, the old school scouts aren't always right, and you blend it in the middle. Those are the guys. Those are the teams that are going to beat you. The teams that have gone too far over the edge. I didn't fear them. Right? They're telling their scouts who to go see. Here's a list in your territory. Go see them. That's not really scouting, right? I got out off the beaten path. And, you work, right? You don't just go see these 10 guys the office tells you to go see, but that's the way it works now a lot.
Man, it's crazy. And you think about it, right? Is like, to me, I want to scout the best player that I know can help our situation in a clubhouse that we know is one, could either really help and bolster our starting rotation and bullpen, and a guy that can be a game changer in a lineup that can get us up and on base, somehow stretch, the base runners to get us more runs batted in. Because, yeah, you're right. We're in a world of which chicks dig the long balls. In my opinion, right. I'm like, I care more about driving those runs in because I'm playing a game of inches, because I want to play smart defensive pitching, whether strikeout, ground up, fly out, whatever it is. I want to make it difficult for my opposing offense. But then I'm up and at the plate. I want to be the hardest out that I could possibly be, so it keeps the pitchers' mounds rattling their cages. So I think about this, Pat, and this has been an ongoing, tug of war with Major League Baseball and fans. Is one, the Dodgers are just smart at what they do because they have the right guys in place that go and find the guys. And they find them that knows they're going to get the guys that can play offensively and defensively, and also have the pitchers that can get through 6, 7 innings, throwing your setup at 8 and then close it at 9. So when I looked at this, I was talking to a bunch of former major leaguers, Logan Morrison and Jay Jackson. And the one thing is that the Dodgers found a way to manipulate the money situation with the deferred comp. They found a way, and every team could do this method if they tried. But to me, Kyle Tucker in that contract, that's $240 million. Toronto wanted $350 with a longer contract. And then you got Bo Bichette that the Phillies threw a long-term contract on, and then he goes to the Mets. Look, where is kind of the struggle right now that the fans aren't quite seeing with this? Because to me, my next question afterward will involve the salary cap. But to me, all 30 of these clubs could do it if they really could with their ownerships, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all a matter of spending the money. If you want to spend it, you don't. Well, you don't. The Dodgers have, they're the Yankees, right? When I first started, it was the Yankees. We always used to laugh and say the Yankees could just beat you up with a checkbook, right?
Yeah.
That's all they had to do, especially in America, right? If you had a guy all lined up to sign in Latin America, Yankees swoop in with a checkbook and say, how much are they giving you? $100,000, two. Okay, what are you going to do, right? You're going to take the two. And so they didn't have to like work harder than anybody else. They had to have that checkbook and like beat us up. And the Dodgers are kind of turned into that, right? They're just like running their payroll up, paying the taxes and all that scare all the other teams off of like, don't care. Their ownership's worth billions. They just like win, right? Okay, well, sign him. Pay another $30 million in tax. Okay. Tampa Bay Rays whole payroll $79 million, right? They're not going to pay $30 million in tax money.
Yeah.
It's an playing field to a degree. Now in the amateur market, in the in Puerto Rico for the draft, I mean, it's, you can't do that, right? Because it's a draft. I mean, you have to have pole position, right? If I've got the pole position on you and I got the best player in Texas that I want to take, I pick ahead of you. Well, guess what? I'm going to get that guy and you're not, even though you might love him more than I do, because you can't do that. Like in the old days, draft came around in 1965, Yankees would just pay everybody because you could sign whoever you wanted to for whatever you wanted to, right? If it was like that now, it would be 3 teams in Major League Baseball and everybody else would be 4A, right? Because they go spend the money and just buy it all up. That's why they put the draft in, right? So you can't do that. You have to be better than the next. You have to be the next guy, and that comes, frankly, school scouting, because you have to have boots on the ground. You have to know the players. You have to know the families. A spreadsheet can't know, that kid's work ethic. The spreadsheet can't know. And I have a degree in computer science, right? So I'm not opposed to it. Back in the 90s, I wrote the Astros' first computer scouting software back in 1990 to 92. So I wasn't, oblivious to all this stuff, how an algorithm works, right? I kind of have a handle on that. But tell me that's a good or bad family situation. That can't tell me how hard he's going to work. It can't tell me, what's going to happen to this kid if all of a sudden he gets a bunch of money in his hands. Is he a free spirit? Is he a wild child? I mean, only way to know that is to have boots on the ground, an old school scout, a veteran before that's seen it and maybe because I made a bunch of mistakes, right? I had a few successes along the way too, and you kind of learn from that. And these teams that are going out and just hiring young guys with no experience and giving them a list and say, hey, go write these 10, 15, 20, whatever guys up in your team. It's bad. It's bad. I mean, they're going to have to really rely on their crop system to make it to get things right.
Yeah. And, because this is interesting, because with the way in the state of Major League Baseball and where it's headed, and to me, it's like any of these clubs could try to utilize the method that the Dodgers are using. So when I think about this, the salary cap, to me, I'm on the side of this. If you put in a salary cap, here comes the lockout. Because to me, all it's going to benefit, it's going to benefit more of the owners than anything else. Because especially when you're looking at Washington, Pittsburgh, a lot of those teams that should be competing, in the money market. But even for some of the guys that they're not even signing that. Now, luckily, as I'm saying this, the Pirates go and sign, Marcell Ozuna. They go and sign up some of these guys to try to avoid that conversation. But here I am in Colorado where you still are dealing with the horrible contract of Chris Bryant. And it's like, when are we going to move off this? And at least the Rockies get competitive, regardless of being in a division with the Dodgers. Because here's the thing, Pat, think about it. 25 years, only since the Dodgers' last World Series, there's only been 6 teams, maybe more than that were the number 1 team in baseball in all of it in 25 years. So it's like any of these teams that are in a competitive money market could do it. But should we honestly implement this salary cap? Because this has been an ongoing hand over fist conversation that's been happening.
Yeah, that conversation for a long time. And a salary cap would just benefit ownership. But, to come with that, the floor, right? You have to have a floor. and a cap, right? And then to eliminate arbitration, right? If you eliminated arbitration, where those players like a Scooble, captive, I mean he got paid, but that's 2-time Cy Young winner. But guys like that normally they get the arbitration caps them, they might be worth more, but you eliminate arbitration, and then a cap, and then some of those guys that become superstars fast don't have to deal with the arbitration, like an Acuna, right? That like flashed right on the scene, the star, right?
Yep.
Well, then he doesn't have to deal with arbitration. He's going to get paid market value, right? And that would drive the market to where those players would get paid, right? The ones that deserve to be paid would be paid. And then you'd have to be smart. You'd have to have a bunch of smart guys in the front office, right? Working on, what is it to do with this much money? Where we best spent. So I can remember in the mid '90s, Jerry Hunsicker was my GM in Houston, and we had a very small office. It was 4 of us, right? A couple of admin ladies that were super. 4 of us. So we did that, right? So Jerry Hunsicker came to me and said, "Hey, this is the mid '90s, right? This is before Moneyball, before anybody thought about any of this stuff," and said, "What do we got to do to win?" Well, and how many runs do we have to score to win a division? We have to score to win 90 games, right? That research didn't take long, right? Even back in those days, we could file that up. Like, okay, how do we score 90 runs? Yeah. So we were working on how do we put together a roster that can score how many runs it was, I forget the number now, to win 90 games, because 90 games would normally win you the division, right, or get you in the. So we started doing that in the mid '90s, right? So that wasn't that they're. I mean, again, sell something, right? They're selling themselves. They're selling this. They got a lot of promoters and that, but we've been doing that forever. So if you had a cap and a floor, no arbitration, then you could figure out, okay, what kind of roster do we put together to win 90 games, and where's I spent to make that 90 games happen, right? Is that, what do I budget for an outfielder, an outfielder? What do I budget for an what do I, starting pitching? Work from there and go from there. And it can be done. Yeah. But, the union's going to scream about a cap, and they're going to, like they always have, they're going to scream. But the consolation you're going to have to give up is probably eliminate arbitration, because that holds the superstar players back early and gives the club the advantage, sticking their feet into the fire of not being able to get paid. They should, like statistically, arbitration has always been a disaster. In my opinion, that's a great point. That's a great point. I've never thought of that before until you brought it up. That's a great point. I really, like, to me, it's like I'm all about competitiveness from all 30 clubs, but I understand that there's the difficulty on that side. But that makes a great point with the arbitration, because that does kind of serve as that roadblock for some teams, to where it's like, look, you can already give this kid a length term contract, because you already know he's already in here in this league and he's on that rookie deal, and then he's going to get that big bucks. And so if you could eliminate that and then find a way for, other teams to really be competitive in that market, then maybe that can, balance out the landscape. So that's something worth tapping into. I'll have to look a little more on that, but that's a great point. I appreciate you for bringing that back. Appreciate you, Pat, for joining on by, man. 30 years of MLB scouting, and you know what? I give you a lot of props. Even in the new technology stuff, you're still sticking to your guns. You still see exactly where the talent holds and still building upon it. Even with the 3 World Series championships, you know exactly how to build them and you know where to find them, man. Appreciate you for coming on by. Yeah, don't be afraid to call over there to your buddies in Denver, and if they need a good old that's sitting around watching TV, they can call me right up.
Hey, there you go. Hey, I'll put in a good word for it right for there for sure.
Good word. Right.
Take care, man.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Mm-hmm.